There's a lot of those students applying to MD PhD programs, assuming that they're going to get in because they have perfect stats. Mission Accepted, Season 1, Episode 2. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you. Before we jump into your application, what do you think it was in your application that helped you be successful?
I think it was both my experiences showing how I moved on from personal difficulties and from moving a lot, and also moving to this country a bit older, as well as how I just conveyed those experiences, and of course my research experience.
Yeah. So you are an MD PhD student. Were an MD PhD applicant. So a lot of the applications as we go through this season for Mission Accepted are students who are currently in the cycle. You are someone who finished the cycle last year and now are a first-year student. I want to ask you, for those who are in the cycle now, in the future in the cycle, how was that transition to medical school for you?
It was kind of crazy. I moved and started medical school within a weekend. I moved to New York. I lived in San Diego before that.
Mhm.
And I ran my last Western blot on Saturday. We flew, and then a couple of days later, I started med school.
Yeah. And how, obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so starting medical school in the middle of a pandemic, not ideal. How much of your school do you think has been taken away because of the pandemic, or has your school done well with transitioning and integrating everything?
So we're completely virtual.
Yeah.
We are not going into in-person. I think over like 70% of our class is still home or somewhere that is not New York. I think they've been doing as good as, one might expect from transitioning so fast. And I think what's missing is the interaction with both the faculty and, of course, the students, especially the students. It's hard to connect to a class of over 100 people online. So I think just being able to study with people and talking to people is very different and is missing.
Yeah, it's definitely something I hope you all can get your second year experience in person, because some of my best friends are my med school classmates. And so hopefully you will be able to experience that as well. All right. You ready to dive into your application?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to take a look at your application. And the first thing that I see is that you applied a little bit later, July 30th. What was the thought process or the process leading up to a little bit later of an application?
So my plan was to apply early.
It's always the plan.
I was very iffy, like very I was doubting my Mcat score.
Okay.
So I was thinking whether I wanted to wait another year and apply or just go ahead and apply. Mm-hmm. And I also took a bit longer writing some of my essays. And at that point, when I applied, I had very little clinical experience. So that was another thing. I started interpreting that summer. So I wanted to have a little bit more of those experiences in my application.
Okay. Yeah, those are good reasons to delay a little bit. And there's always that caveat, right? I talk a lot about applying early, making sure that you're in, making sure that the schools have enough seats to interview you and seats to accept you. But then there's that balance of applying with the best application possible, and it sounds like you played that balance well. And so good job with that. All right, so that was the first thing that stood out. Obviously, you are an underrepresented minority in medicine, so that's huge, and I don't want to take that away from you. I always talk about, right, playing all the cards that were dealt, and if that process is a little bit easier for you, and we'll see in your application, like, you're a stellar applicant, period, no matter who you are. But a lot of students will, especially those looking on YouTube and watching this, will go, "Oh, she just got in because she's a Latina," right? And it's just
definitely a thought I had,
Yeah.
which I wish I didn't.
but it's not wrong, right? We need more Latinx physicians out there, and so schools are looking for that diversity, and are willing to overlook some things that they won't overlook in someone like me as a white male, and I'm perfectly okay with that, right? I understand that we need diversity to make healthcare better. And again, looking at your application, no matter who you are, you're a great applicant. So I just wanted to point that out, that we play the cards we are given, as I like to say. And so we have disadvantaged essay. You marked yes, and you tell a story about being an immigrant and what that was like, and coming to this country and overcoming. I think is a really good disadvantaged essay. A lot of students will take this time to really just talk about how amazing they are, even though like what they had to overcome. You just laid it out. Like, here's what I did. Here's what I had to overcome, right? You're working throughout high school and college, and what that looked like. And so what your essay did was, it wasn't just a big pity party, right? Which a lot of students fear with a disadvantaged essay. Your disadvantaged essay said, here's who I am, what I've overcome, and use this as a lens to view the rest of my application, which is perfect. I want to know who you are. And I was at an admissions conference in Toronto last year. The company that does Casper, they put on an admissions conference, and I went and spoke to the admissions committee directors and people. And one of the admissions committee members talked about, like, what you did with what you have is a very big part of your story, right? Someone who is from an upper class, who was raised with butlers and had the best education and private tutors, but didn't really do anything with that, versus someone like you as an immigrant and working and limited time because of that, and what you did with all of your time. It tells a great story. And so I think you did a good job with your disadvantaged essay to really just highlight what you've done. Going on a little bit further, no big red flags, which is good. And then we get into college. And so you start off at junior college. A lot of students are like, oh, you can't go to community college, right? It's a very common immigrant story, a very common disadvantaged, underrepresented story of starting off at community college, because it's cheaper, it's easier. It's more flexible, especially if you're needing to work and do other things. And so I hope that medical schools get away from marking students down for going to community college to start, because I think this is one way to increase diversity, is not penalizing students who go to community college. Obviously, you made the best of it with A's in your freshman year, sophomore year. You did great. And then junior year, you got that B. Oh, what was that like, getting that first B?
It was liberating.
It was liberating. You're like, I don't have to be perfect anymore, right?
It hurt when I got it, but in the end, it was liberating.
Yeah.
Because I could get another B after that. It was fine.
I can even get a C maybe. No.
Yeah. I realized it was fine. And when people see all the A's, I do like to mention, like, it seems like maybe community college is easier. But I would like to note that I probably worked a lot harder in my classes in community college that I may have at UCSD. Part of it was that I was an older student. I had more tools. But I just wanted to point out that, community college isn't like easy or less than.
Yeah, it's a very old kind of myth around community college. I loved the reaction to, like, it was liberating, right? It's like buying that brand new pair of sneakers, and you keep them perfect until you get that first scuff on it, and you're like, screw it. Like, what am I doing? I need to wear these things.
That was exactly it.
Yeah, very cool. That's awesome. All right, and then obviously you rebounded well. You didn't go into a cycle of torment and B's and C's going on. So lots of A's in your grades, another B plus there, a B. So GPA wise, right, it's very easy to see. Stellar GPA. science GPA, non-science GPA, total GPA, all outstanding. Great job with that. And then we get to your MCAT score. So I'm interested to know, you talked about having a little bit of doubt about your MCAT score. 511 is about the average, roughly, for matriculants to medical school. Looking at the breakdown of yours, 127 for Chem Phys, 128 for cars, which is great as I'm assuming an ESL student. 128 for biochem, psych. So great scores across the board. Great score overall. Why were you concerned with your MCAT score?
I was under the impression that MD PhD applicants needed to be perfect and have great MCAT scores. But as interviewing, I realized that wasn't true, and that perhaps it was the opposite. That as an MD PhD applicant, I was more allowed to, if I can, put it that way, to have a lesser MCAT score, because our research experience is really what makes us shine.
Yeah. And I was going to go with that, right? For MD PhD applicants, my experience typically is there's more flexibility with stats and more focus on, are you truly someone who wants to do research, who has experience in research, kind of has these bigger life goals of research, versus someone who's like, oh, I can go to medical school for free and get a stipend? I'm applying MD PhD, right? There's a lot of those students applying to MD PhD programs, assuming that they're going to get in because they have perfect stats, when in actuality, someone like yourself, and we'll get to your experiences, someone like yourself who's kind of on this mission, and why you're on this mission just stands out above and beyond everything else, and really helps tell your story. So 511, I'm excited. I'm glad that you applied with that 511. It's a great score no matter what, and still great for MD PhDs as well. And then going back, one other thing that we talked about earlier, right? As a Latina woman, do you prefer Latina or Hispanic?
I don't have a preference.
Okay, just wondering. So as a Latina applicant, right? Did that come into play at all? Go, well, I'm going to apply even with the 511, even if I don't think it's good enough, because maybe they'll give me a little bit of flexibility.
I honestly didn't think about it that way, because I signed up for the MCAT 2 more times.
Oh.
I took it 1 more time.
Okay.
And I voided that score.
Oh.
Because I didn't finish the chemistry section, which it was my major. It was like one of my stronger ones in the practice. So I voided it. Mm-hmm. And then I signed up to take it a 3rd time and just chickened out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
But no, my thought process was, I panicked. I was like, I probably will have so much stress about doing better that I won't. And but I didn't think about it that way, what you just mentioned.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So great MCAT score, 1 score on the books. So for students, obviously, that voided score doesn't show up anywhere. Schools don't know that you took it. It's not a data point that impacts anything other than your bank account, because you had to pay for it.
Yes. I did have the FAP, so that helped for the first year.
Good. Okay. The financial assistance program, for those who don't know. All right. And we get into your clinical experience. So again, looking at the date you applied, so September 30th, 2019, and the date of your clinical experience was right at the tail end there. And so I'm assuming this is the clinical experience that you're talking about, kind of cramming in the next one in here as well, June 2019. So you're like, I need some clinical experience. Let me make sure I get this in under the gun. And for the majority of students applying to non-MD PhD programs, this is one thing that kind of at the very end looks a little sketchy, because you're like, if you're telling me you want to be a physician, why has it taken you so long to get some clinical experience? And now it looks like you're just trying to check off the box, which is exactly what you were doing. But again, as an MD PhD applicant, yes, you still have to show that you want to be a physician, but your research weighs really big into your application. And we'll get into a lot of your research too. So I'm glad you were able to get some of that clinical experience in so that you can talk about it. Obviously, with it being kind of last minute, not the most impactful things that you can talk about in terms of how it was important to you, but you were able to get it in, which is good. You have a little bit of storytelling here, right? Of this patient whose name is blocked off here, talking about the story of that interaction. Again, I'm a huge storytelling fan, and so you telling a story about this interaction, I think, is great. And then how you carried it forward, right? As a future clinician, I hope to gain the experience and training to provide care beyond symptom management for patients like that patient, right? So how it was impactful, what it meant to you, how you impacted this person, which is great. Student-run free clinic, again, more clinical experience. This one you projected out to when you were planning to start medical school. A lot of people don't realize you can do that with AMCAS. It's different for every application service and how they want. For AMCAS, they want you to project out, or they allow you to, rather, project out to when you plan to start medical school, both date-wise and hours-wise. So that's what it looks like you did here, which is great. So about 20 hours a month doing the interpreting, which is awesome. And again, a little bit of storytelling, talking about impact with the patient, not just basic clinical experience. Some honors and recognition, which is great. Listing it, I think this is the perfect way to do honors recognition type stuff. Just list them out. A little bit more clinical experience here. So you had some in the past, which is good. Talking about that impact as well. Again, going through talking about specific patients telling a story. Where did you get the storytelling idea from? From my YouTube videos or yeah? Okay.
Yeah, from you. I've always liked creative writing, which is why even though English was my second language, I do think my CAR score was good because I'm an avid reader and I like writing. But yeah, from you, totally. 100%.
And did anyone comment on your writing and the writing style during your interviews?
I had one person here at my current medical school tell me about my personal statement and how much she enjoyed it.
Cool. Okay. Good. All right. Poster presentations and research. So now we get into the kind of the mamma jamma of the application, right? 5,000 hours of research here. And really I think the mission behind your research is really what stands out, as we'll talk about a little bit later in your personal statement. Your research is focused around oncogenes, right, and cancer genetics, and looking into that. And so again, really good job just talking about what you did, not just from a job description wise, but really kind of getting a good picture of who you are in this. And this is like for people who are thinking about MD PhD, right? 5,000 hours, like that's good. You need a lot of research if you're going to say, I want to do research for my living. And so you obviously have shown that, which is great.
We should mention that included gap years, which was when I got most of my experience.
Okay, cool. So outside of just kind of on the side while you're in school, you're full-time in that as well. It's great. So you have this, the teaching assistant, which is great. What you learned from it, how it impacted you. You did something I typically don't recommend students do, and kind of transitioning how it helps you as a physician. Not the end of the world. It's just not something I think is important for extracurriculars. a little bit more research in here, and then all of your physician shadowing kind of put together at the end, which I think is perfectly fine. Good way to do that. Adding up those total hours, giving a broad range of dates there. And then some other experiences, non-medical stuff, and kind of rounding out who you are and what you're doing. Again, I think from a description-wise, I looked at these earlier. You didn't make any huge kind of red flag mistakes or common mistakes that I talk about all the time in terms of just listing basic job descriptions and the sales pitch kind of stuff of look how amazing I am. So good job with that stuff. And again, just a couple other experiences in here that really highlight who you are and what you've been doing. And then we get to your personal statement. And I think this for me is where your story shines in terms of kind of who you are and what you're doing. Great writing, showing, not telling. You have, you're obviously talking about your sister here, who it looks like she's a physician as well. And so having that exposure and seeing your sister kind of drive you. And then talking about your mom and the cancer that she had to go through. How's your mom doing now?
She's doing well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. And so having this story here of you interacting with your mom and seeing that impact and really taking this story, right, of my interest in cancer started long before it grew in my mother's chest, but my passion for eradicating it stemmed from seeing my mom in pain, right? That's just a powerful statement of really understanding what's driving you for this. And we talk a lot about making sure that you don't kind of pigeonhole yourself as I want to be the cancer doctor. But again, for someone like yourself applying MD PhD, you've kind of declared that already. Like you have all of this research in cancer, you have personal experience, unfortunately, with cancer. Like this is your mission, you're on it. And sure, you could change your mind later on and maybe you find a mentor, a different PI who's studying something else that tickles your fancy. But this is your interest right now, and this is who you are. And I think it's perfectly fine putting it out there. You talk about kind of other experiences that you had. Again, the storytelling and how you talk about, right, her eyes widened when I knock on the open door. Right, just great storytelling of really showing the reader who you're doing or who you are and what you're doing in these situations. Again, here, what's your mission? They showed me that more than a dream, becoming a physician will allow me to fulfill my duty to my community. Right. So obviously your community as a Spanish-speaking woman, as an immigrant, again, I can see who you are through this, not from a look at how amazing I am, look at how different I am, look at my great communication skills, look at my amazing empathy. You're like, this is an interaction that I had, and this is what's motivating me, period. And I can see so much from that. And then we get to a few more stories here and shadowing and more interactions, which is great. And then again, kind of the conclusion of where you've come from and where you're going, wanting to care for people when they're the most vulnerable, bring comfort to their life, and be their physician. So powerful personal statement there. Great job with that. And then we look a little bit further on. So for many people who haven't seen an MD PhD application before, the MD PhD application it's basically everything a normal application is, except there's two more essays. The MD PhD application, which is basically your why do you want to be an MD PhD, and then the research essay, which is like tell me everything that you're doing with your research and really show me how passionate you are about research. How did you approach these two essays?
Yeah, so when I first wrote, going back really quick to the personal statement, I remember my PI, which is my boss in research. He told me that I didn't mention the research at all in the personal statement, and he thought that was kind of weird. And then I mentioned to him like, oh, I'm going to be talking about my research a lot, so don't worry.
Don't worry about that.
And for the MD PhD,
and let me tell you, I think you did it right. I think too many students who are applying MD PhD focus on research too much in their normal personal statement, which I think whether or not you're applying MD PhD or not, your personal statement is why do you want to be a doctor, not why do you want to be a researcher. So I think you did it perfectly.
And in terms of the MD PhD essay, that one, I thought about it and why medicine, and then why the PhD, and then how do they join in my goals and like what I want. So that's kind of how I went through it, where I would write one paragraph about the research, then the medicine, and then together. I think that's how I did it.
Yeah. And before we hit record, you talked about how you went about writing. And one of the things that I recommend all the time is just doing a big brain dump without trying to edit it and making it perfect. It's kind of the first draft. How long did it take to get through this process of first words on paper before you had that final draft?
The brain dump was easy and therapeutic.
Yeah.
So that was just me sitting for a few hours in a library and just typing away. And then putting it together, that took a lot more time. I did my personal statement first. That took like 3 drafts. And I did ask for help from a friend as well as from my husband and one of the physicians I shadowed, and they all gave me some input. I think the person that most gave me input was my husband, probably because he knows me best. And then for the MD PhD essay and the research essay, those were a lot more straightforward. Especially the research essay, it felt like just writing a very broad paper. And the MD PhD, because I had a very set idea of what I wanted it to say, it was also a lot more straightforward.
Okay, cool. All right, so diving in a little bit more here, getting into the MD PhD application, obviously bringing up your mom again, talking about the cancer, why that's important for you, what's driving you, which is great. I don't really have any big comments here for the MD PhD application or the essay, because I think it's something you were able to focus on, as you talked about, right? Why is this research important? Why do I want to be a researcher? Why do I need this PhD? And I love the focus here at the end, right? Is this translational outcome of my work? I think it's one of those kind of balancing acts that translational research is. It's almost this like kind of buzzword that a lot of students throw around nowadays, and so we have to be careful with it. But again, going back to your focus of why you're doing this, you just have so much motivation behind what you're doing and personal experience behind what you're doing that it's just very easy to see what that means to you. A lot of students who don't have that personal story, and you don't have to have a personal story, right? I don't want to wish cancer on people just so you can go be a great MD PhD applicant. But if you throw around words like translational research is important to me without really backing up why it is, then it turns into that buzzword that really has no meaning. So again, just that that impact that you want to have obviously just continues to shine through. And then your research hours here, it looks like these hours are less than your previous hours listed. Why is that?
I didn't project here. So okay. I had a full more year of full-time research in the other ones.
Did the instruction manual tell you not to project out?
Oh man, I don't remember, but I think because the research experience was because of the past, I reasoned that the hours should be passed.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what the application instruction manual says. It'd be interesting to look up. And then significant research experience, right? So MD PhD application is basically like, why do I want to be a researcher? And then this significant research experience, really diving into the research that you had. And I'm still a fan of storytelling as much as possible, even through your significant research experience essay. You don't necessarily story tell, but you give these anecdotes and what you're learning and everything that you're doing, I think is powerful. And so basically this essay is really lay out everything you've done and show me how much you understand so that I know that I'm not going to interview someone who hopefully just hasn't checked some boxes. So good job with your significant research experience essay. You can see this essay is really long. It's a 10,000 character limit. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So you can see it's a huge essay that we're not going to dive into the full essay here. But obviously you can pause and kind of see how you took that and did well with it. Talk about, as an MD PhD applicant, we can kind of see your application, how as an MD PhD applicant you designate programs. What was that process like for you as you're designating an MD PhD? Because a lot of students don't know, even as an MD PhD applicant, you can still apply to schools just MD, schools maybe that don't have a combined program. For you, it looks like all of your programs are MD PhD programs. How did you determine schools that you were applying to?
That was tough. It took a long time. So I started by looking, the NIH has an MSTP website, so all the programs that are funded by the NIH. And I started with that, especially looking at both coasts, both the California coast and the New York coast. And the reason I did that was so that it was easier for my husband to find a job. He works in tech, so it would be easier in a big city, wherever that was. Yep. So that's how I started with the kind of narrowing down.
Yep. And then MSTP, just to interrupt real quick, MSTP is Medical Scientist Training Program. That's the NIH's program that they fund these spots for medical schools.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And I did apply to a couple that weren't MSTP funded, but I ended up not submitting secondaries to those anyway. So.
Okay. And then, so from a family situation, what worked well for your husband, obviously with your interest in cancer and cancer genes and cancer therapeutics, how much research did you put into what type of research is going on at the schools to make sure that they're going to have something that they have a PI there that's doing stuff that you can get involved in? Or is that not a thought and you're like, I'm just going to go be a trailblazer and do whatever I want to do?
So it definitely is a thought. As MD PhD students, you want to complete your PhD within 4 years, ideally. So you don't want to take forever. If there's no one there that does the kind of work you want to do, and you want to just, like you said, be a trailblazer, it'll probably take a lot longer than 4 years.
Yeah.
That said, studying cancer, everyone studies cancer. So pretty much everywhere there was someone that studied cancer. It wasn't like I was looking at a very specific microbe in the gut microbiota, and it that would have been easier to select, but I guess
poor GI docs.
No, and it's great research. I think it's super interesting. And then right now we're in microbiology, so I do think it's really, really interesting. But I think having a cancer focus allowed me to be really broad about my selection. And I just also wanted to apply to as many schools as possible because, like I said, I was doubting my Mcat score, right? So I wanted to make sure to get in somewhere, to have at least one acceptance. So I did apply to a lot of different places. Yeah.
So I see 32 schools that you applied to. So a lot of schools. How many interviews did you end up getting?
I got, I think, around 15. I only went to 9.
Yeah. And this was pre-pandemic when you were interviewing. And talk about the differences. A lot of students, again, don't realize the difference between an MD interview and an MD PhD interview. So most MD PhD interviews are over 2 days at least. Was that pretty norm for you?
Mm-hmm, that's right. Most were over 2 days. I think only 2 or 3 were 1 day. And I would like to mention, I had the financial assistance program, right? So meaning I didn't have all the money in the world to apply everywhere and interview everywhere. The good thing about MD PhD programs is that if you do have the financial assistance program, they'll cover your secondary application fee. Yep. So I paid $0 for secondary applications. I just spent on the extra, I think it was 10 primary applications that weren't included within the 20 FAP.
Yep. Obviously, very successful application. Very successful undergraduate student. A lot of the stories that I bring on are students who had to overcome a bunch and struggled in school or had to overcome a poor MCAT. you just have a great story of overcoming just life in general as an immigrant and what you've been through, obviously, that you highlighted in your disadvantaged essay. How much of your upbringing do you think leads to you being driven to being successful now? Or do you think it's just great genes, great genetics? Obviously, your sister being very successful as well as a physician. How much of all that do you think plays a part in where you are today?
I think it plays a very big part. My parents were always very supportive of whatever we wanted to do. They didn't really push us to any direction. Neither of them went to college. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. But my mom was very interested in medicine. She had like a big blue book where she would look up symptoms and she would look up drugs and things like that. And she may have, given us a medication when we were sick without consulting a doctor, which may not have been the best thing. But she was really interested in that. And my oldest sister is a doctor. My middle sister is a dentist. So we all went through to healthcare. And I think a lot of it was my parents just saying, whatever you're going to be, just make sure you do a good job at it. It doesn't matter what it is.
That's awesome. Any last minute advice for someone watching this who maybe comes from a similar background as you, or wants to go to MD PhD, go do an MD PhD program like yourself? What kind of final words of wisdom do you have for them?
I think what worried me the most starting out was the amount of time, both in getting to medical school and then the MD PhD program, which is 8 years. I told myself I'd do 2 years at community college, 2 years max at my undergrad, and then go straight. And then I'll still be young, which didn't happen. I took 6 years in my undergrad, 4 of those at my community college, then took 2 gap years. So that's already a total of 8, and I have 8 to go. So I think the biggest advice I'd say is take your time. It's fine. Make sure you do well. You'll be whatever, we'll hopefully all get to 50, 60, 70, and we'll get there. It doesn't matter how long it took us.
Well, hopefully with your research, we can go much longer. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story, and I wish you the best of success in your medical journey.
Thank you.